So in this video, I've got a little project that I want to do. When I'm towing my travel trailer with this truck, it squats a little more than I'd like it to. When I had the small bullet trailer, it squatted, and I just put a leveling hitch and a sway bar on that. Worked great. Just leveled everything out. My most recent trailer was 8,300 pounds, completely loaded, and it had a tongue weight of about 850, 900 pounds. That leveling hitch didn't quite work out with that much weight. I still got a lot of squat in the back. Now, if you know these Ram pickups, the rear suspension is a coil spring. Those coil springs, you can upgrade the coil springs, but then your overall driving experience is pretty firm. So for just $120, you can add an airbag inside of that spring, and then that just gives you that additional support. So I want to try that out because I am switching over to a fifth wheel trailer, and when I hooked up the fifth wheel to this, it squatted about the same as my last trailer with the bumper hitch. And I could upgrade the leveling bars on that hitch so that I could distribute the weight better with the last trailer, but with the fifth wheel, there's really nothing more I can do. When I hooked up the fifth wheel, it had dropped down about 2 inches overall. So I'm hoping with this air spring, I can keep it down to about 1 inch, maybe 1.5 inch maximum of squat in the tail. The nice thing about the fifth wheel is it doesn't raise the nose. When I loaded the truck, the tail went down, the nose didn't change at all. Now with the big pull-behind trailer, when I squatted in the tail, I actually raised the nose about 1 inch. That made things uncomfortable. I'm doing a lot of research trying to decide which type of air spring I wanted to add on this truck. The airbags, there's like a Firestone type double airbag that you can put on top of the axle next to the spring, and you have to cut off the bump stop. I just wasn't comfortable about cutting off the bump stop, so that's why I've chosen this. One of 2 reasons, actually. The Firestone type double airbag, they're around $350, and it's a lot of labor. This was just over $100, and it's really quite simple. Now, if you go by the instructions, one of the things I'm finding out online as I'm doing all my research, because I'm crazy about that, I really need to know what I'm getting myself into. And if you're watching this video, it's because you want to know too. Everything I found says you don't have to take the rear end of your truck all apart, like the instructions say. The rear end has a torsion bar. They say to take that torsion bar all off and just let it hang down. Let the rear end hang down, take off the shocks, and then take out the spring. Well, from what I'm reading, that's 4 or 5 hour project start to finish. Well, another thing I found is you don't have to do all that. You can just roll these up like a taco and shove them in between the springs. So that's what I'm going to try today. And then another tip I was finding out in all my research is if you go by the instructions, several thousand miles down the road, there's a chance that you're going to lose air because these things work loose. And we'll talk about that in depth here with a lot of the complaints I've been hearing about these losing air. So I'll show you how to fix that. Let's start by getting everything out. There's the bag. Pretty simple. It's got a tire type inlet with no inner valve so the air could go in and out. Got plenty of hose. And we've got fittings. It looks like we've got enough for 2 separate lines. One of the things I'm finding in all my research and you'll just have to kind of really think about it and play out the scenarios in your conditions and how you're planning on using your truck. The instructions, they recommend just doing a T-line and having a single fitting so that you air it up with one line. Psst, and it fills both bags. Now there are scenarios, and I'm not sure exactly all of the scenarios, but it happened to me once where I had a T like this, and I had both airbags full, and I got too much load on one side of the vehicle, and it pushed all the air back to the opposite side and made it even worse. Got my truck into a position where it felt like it was going to just flip me over. I let all the air out of the bags, it settled down, and I was able to get out of the situation. It's extremely rare. It's extremely unlikely you'd get into that scenario. Now, in normal conditions, as you're driving down the road and you're getting into turns, in those situations, as the air travels back and forth, it's not really quick. If it could travel fast, going into a high-speed turn, you might lean a little bit if the air could all of a sudden go across to the other wheel. But it's not likely. It does transfer pretty slowly, and the load of your trailer, the load of your truck, it stays better in the T than it would to have two independent lines. But it's definitely something to give some thought to. Is would you want to do it with two separate lines and control them independently, or have them work together with the T? So one of the tips I'm finding that I'll show you what I'm going to do, we'll jack the truck up, get all the suspension hanging so that it's hanging on the shock, and then you've got the full extension of the spring. Take the wheels off, make sure to put good safety jack stands underneath the truck. So then I'll be able to fish that collapsed taco between the springs and up into place. We'll start by collapsing these. So I'll push them down flat on their sides. Put the air cap on there so that it'll keep from filling back up in there. And then it's just a matter of, like a hot dog, just folding it down the middle. But I'm gonna have to get this down on the ground, put my knee in it, and fold it over. So before I collapse this down into a taco so that I can slide it up into the spring, I want to add my little valve to the top. And a really important tip that I found online is these have a tendency to work loose and leak. Guys are tightening them down, and then they're stripping them out. So then it's ruined. So what's the solution? Tighten them too tight, you damage it. You don't, and then it leaks. So let's use some Loctite. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use a medium strength Loctite, since this is brass, and I will just give that a good coating of Loctite. Just coat the threads all the way around. This is a paste. You can use the liquid drops as well. I'm just going to give this a little bit of a turn. Not too much, just enough so that I know it's secure. Okay, so now you can see I have my nice little folded over airbag, and I've got my valve nice and secured in there so I don't damage it. Don't forget your clamp and your hose once you get it up in there. So let's get the truck up on the jack stands, get that rear end hanging down, and get the tires off. Now I have my truck on jack stands, I've got it all safe. If you're going to get the spring out, as the instructions say, you've got to take off the shock absorber. You've got to take the brake loose so you don't overextend the brake lines. And here is the torsion bar you've got to take loose. There's a panhard bar up there too that might interfere, that you've got to undo and drop that down. So doing it by the book, there's a lot more steps than really is necessary. Sliding in between here, I'll show you how to do it. So this little puck needs to be on top of the airbag once it's up in there. And then, of course, you've got your hose and your little clamp that goes onto that valve. What I'm planning on doing is sliding this up in place, cutting these ties, and then it looks like there's plenty enough room to where I can get in here and add the airline. But before I do that, I do want to try to run the airline down through the frame because it looks like there's a good access there, and then I don't have to worry about this hose being damaged by any heat from the exhaust. My truck has full fender wells. Some of them don't. Some of them just have partial fender wells, so you can see easy access to the back side of this. But I can just reach up on top of the frame right here, and there is access to go all the way through. And it looks like this hose will go right across the top of the frame, and there are a couple of access holes in that frame where I'm going to go through the hole, go into the frame, and run it all the way out the back. Okay, I have my hose up through there. I routed it down through the frame rail. Now let's see if we can get this up into place. Man, that's pretty simple. Cut these zip ties. Or just slide them off. I'll just kind of massage it back into shape. My disc on the top of it. And while I have easy access to my hose, I will go ahead and clamp that down. Okay, there's another good tip for us. Put that hose on that valve before you slide it up in there. It was pretty difficult to get that little teeny clamp right in the right spot. So that's what we're doing. We're learning as we go. This is what I was struggling with. Not only to get that all the way on, but then to get this little clamp on top of that. And then to be able to see it so that I knew it was secure. You see, it's pretty difficult to get on having it full access. So I can see the ribs through the plastic now. I know I've got it all the way seated. So now I'll go around to the other side and fish it up through and the frame, and then hopefully I can get underneath with enough light and I can show you how I routed this tubing through the framework. I've seen a lot of guys drill a hole somewhere in here or in here to put their valve through. I'm going to put it through the license plate. Then I don't know, just don't want to see that out there. Maybe I'm weird. There's plenty of room on the back side here for the valve and for the hose to run so you don't kink it. Alright, just get this license plate back on and put on some washers and nuts. And this is done. We'll get underneath and zip tie all the lines up. See where I routed the line around the driver's side? I just followed that main wire harness, and then that just goes right up over, right by the shock, so that was perfect. And then I have my wire harness that I added for my 7-pin that goes into the bed. So I routed that along there as well. You can see the T. I routed it right along the back, and then it goes up along inside the frame on the other side, so you can't really see it. And then have a few zip ties. That's all tucked away nice and neat. No chance that it could get dragged or burned by an exhaust. Do a quick test for leaks. What we'll do is I'll just put about 30 pounds of pressure in it and test all the bags and spray a little soapy water on all the fittings. Make sure nothing's leaking. So I'm going to start with about 5 pounds of pressure just to air this whole system up and get the bags into place. That's about 5 pounds of pressure there. It's interesting. We've got 5 pounds of pressure in these and they're still loose inside the spring. You can see they're tightening up now. I've got 20 pounds of pressure in them. There's still plenty of space at the top. So once the weight of the truck comes down on it and compresses that spring, that should go up into place. So before I actually do that, I'll let all the air back out of it so I don't put unwanted tension on that. But it's gone into place. It's looking good. There's no leaks. So I will let the air back out and put the truck back together and get it back on all 4 wheels. Get the truck to settle back down where it was. I don't think it will raise the truck much if I get 30 pounds of pressure in it, but I'll put the gauge on it just in case. Okay, that's 20 psi. It's gone up a ½ inch. I didn't expect it to go up that high. The true test is going to be to load that 5th wheel onto the back of this. It was dropping about 3 inches when I loaded it before. So we'll see what it does this time. Hopefully it just keeps everything nice and flat. So here's an example of my truck with the airbags in it. You can see I've got quite a load. I calculated it all up. It's about 1,200 pounds of plywood and boards for the shed in the back there. So that's about what my 5th wheel trailer weighs, about 1,200 pounds on the pin that goes into the back, and then I have an additional maybe 100 pounds for the 5th wheel hitch. So I'll show you the stance with the airbags in, and these airbags have approximately 20-25 pounds of air in them. So this is the stance. Typical stance on my truck, it's about 3 inches higher in the rear than it is in the front, and with these airbags it's lowered about 1 inch. So with 1,200 pounds it's dropped about 1 inch, and when I put the trailer on 1,200 pounds without the airbags, the rear end sagged about 3 inches. So the truck was level, but it looked off because the front didn't change, but the rear dropped, and with that, it looked like the truck wasn't level when it actually was. But with that 3 inches of drop, that's where you come into play. When you hit a pretty good sized bump and you've got this much load, you can get a pretty good swing in that rear end and you can actually bottom out. And that's where these airbags really help out. So rather than going all the way down and hitting the bump stops and then you're running the risk of something getting damaged, the airbags just take it up. So with 20 pounds of air in those bags, I thought it would make the truck a lot rougher, but especially with a load, it's just wonderful. And when I'm not loaded, I can drop those airbags down to 5 pounds. They say you shouldn't go below that because then the bag is sliding around too much in the spring and it can damage the spring. But I've been leaving it at that 20 pounds of pressure in there so I don't have to air it up and air it down every time I'm loading or unloading the truck. And it rides really well. I was really impressed. A lot better than I thought it would. That'll be it for this video. Appreciate you tuning in. I hope this helps. Showing off a little bit of the tips and tricks that I learned off of searching the internet and reading all the feedback that people had. The fact that the lines were coming loose on the top of the bag, that was an excellent tip. The tip being able to just crush the bag and shove it into the springs saved a lot of time of not having to take all the rear end apart. And then putting that line on the top of the bag first and feeding the line up through, much easier. It was kind of difficult to get that line on the top of the bag once I got the bag in place. Routing the lines down the frame was easy. Drilling that hole, put it on the license plate, pretty simple. And no leaks. So give me a thumbs up if you like what I'm doing. Leave me a comment, love to hear from you. Thanks again. Goodbye for now.